I want you to read Gulliver's Travels. I just finished it a couple days ago. It's a book by Jonathan Swift, and it was written in 1726. That's an old book. That's really old. Actually, I also finished Jane Eyre, and her favorite book, when she was living with her aunt, was also Gulliver's Travels, and she talked about it. Except she read it more as um, like a fantasy exploration book, where the purpose, or more of the author's intent, was that it was a political satire kind of thing. It's really good. It's something that's always amazes me is that even though this book was written in 1726, and so much has changed, obviously, since 1726, but a lot of the points that he brings up and a lot of points that he touches on are still very, very prevalent today. It's so cool. And like I said, it's kind of, there's a lot of political undertones to all the books. I want to just talk very briefly about each book and, or each adventure, whatever you want to call it, and hopefully inspire you to read it too, because it is good. So so it starts out as our main character Gulliver is a surgeon on a boat, so he's sailing around, and each exploration starts with some mishap. Like one, I think he shipwrecks. One, he gets his crew mutinies on him. Um, Regardless, he gets lost from his boat, and just him gets washed up onto a new land. And this cool, he has maps in the book too, so you can kind of see where it is, but obviously it doesn't exist. But he gets washed up on land in his first book, and he's in Lilliput, and all the people are tiny. They're like, I don't know. I think he describes them as the size of his hand, one hand high. Um, and this is, of course, his most famous of the books. And there's so much to talk about, but again, I just want to keep it brief. Something cool about, or something maybe not cool, but interesting, is there's very little, if any, dialogue in the entire book. It's very much just narrated by Gulliver. Even when he's talking about, oops, even when he's talking about when people are, or when like the kings of the nations are speaking to him, he doesn't like put into words. He doesn't like quote them. I think that's cool. I don't know, just something I noticed. Anyways, so his first book, he's in Lilliput, and as a giant. Oh, something else that's really cool is every time he goes somewhere, he can't speak with them. He has to learn the language, and so it takes him like 3 months each time he's at a new place. It takes him like 3 months just to learn the language, so he can talk to the people. I like that. A lot of times in movies today, I mean, it makes sense, right? It's a lot easier to make a movie where everybody speaks the same language. But like in Marvel, we go out to space and Thanos speaks English, Gamora speaks English. Um, the planet dude, Ego, whatever, speaks English. How convenient. I think it's nice that he has to learn the language. Just cool. Every single place he goes, he has to learn the language. It's just cool. Anyways, so Lilliput. He's in Lilliput, and this first book, it really explains and puts into perspective military strength of the ruling party. There's a lot of instances where just the threat of him in the political sphere of a little, what do you call them, Lilliputians? I don't know, is enough to sway the entire nation under the one guy's rule and hand, and he's able to keep his thumb over everyone just because of Gulliver's threat. There's a scene. I think Jack Black did a movie. I haven't seen it, but I think he did a movie on it. But there's a scene in the book where an opposing navy is coming to lay siege upon the group of Lilliputians that he's living with. And all he does is he walks into their ocean and grabs the ropes, like the anchors, and just drags the boats around because he's a giant. It really, it's so interesting to see how much soft power comes from just having that threat. It makes me think of Teddy Roosevelt, speak softly and carry a big stick. It really, really puts that into perspective. Eventually, he has to return to his world, and he does so because not because he wants to necessarily, but because he got wind of a conspiracy of people who opposed the current king, and that they were looking to poison him and kill him. Not because they had any ill will towards Gulliver, just because of how much of a threat that he posed to their entire life as a giant. And he had to flee. The next book, next adventure, he goes to Brobdingnag. And this is the opposite. So basically, everybody is a giant now, and he's a little guy. Once again, he has to learn language, and once he does, he's able to impart his knowledge on their king of Europe, and I think he's English, so of Europe and the surrounding countries, and he's able to talk about how their society is built up, a little bit of their political knowledge and stuff. He really aids the giants in the cabinet, I guess you might say. Once again, in the first book, it was military might and prowess and physical strength. In this one, it's intellectual. And you can see how much influence and sway he has just on knowledge, just on knowing things. His adventure on Brobdingnag comes to a close when an eagle grabs a box that he's living in, and the eagle flies out over the ocean and drops him, and he's picked up by a sailing ship and returns to England, ending his voyage. His third adventure, he goes to Laputa, Balinimbarbi, Lugnag, Glubdrubdrib. This one, I really liked how this one started, because it starts with everybody's the same height in this book and whatnot. For all intents and purposes, they're all humans. Difference is their hearing and vocal organs have to be triggered by an outside source. They don't just always hear. They can't just always speak. Unlike the elite in the society have somebody who will, I'm not really sure, tickle, I guess, parts of the organs for their ear or for their mouth. And this allows them to speak to each other. And they can only do one at a time. And, well, of course, Gulliver can do both at the same time, which is just a marvel. I really thought, when I started reading this one, this one was going to be about influence and propaganda and the importance and the power of just what's the word? The spread of information. You know what I mean. Not the case. That was not. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I could be wrong, but if I were to guess, I would suspect that Jonathan Swift specifically wrote it like this in the beginning, so he could subvert your expectations, because mine were thoroughly subverted. Anyways, this book focuses more on the culture and the differences of goals, or like what beauty might be, or just very strange differences in culture. And even though how different they are, they still manage to work. One of the weirdest ones was, so they breed their sheep to have as little wool as possible. They breed naked sheep. And of course, to us, that's just bizarre. Why would you do that? Sheep are a huge, they are the producers of wool. That's where we get so much clothing, and we can make blankets out of it. We can make all sorts of textiles from it. Rope, whatever, right? And to breed sheep so they're naked? That's just bizarre. I can't really. It's been a long time since I read. Oh, here we go. I'm on the Wikipedia page just to hopefully remember some of this stuff, because it's been a while since I've read this one. I'm going to read you some of the examples. Extracting sunbeams from cucumbers, softening marble for use in pillows, mixing paint by smell. That's just bizarre. And yet it works, I guess. It's hard to judge and hard to take issue with things like this. Sure, it's different and bizarre, but like, it's fine. It's cool. It's cool to think about, and you can extrapolate this into various. I mean, right now, I'm obviously in America, and there's a lot of stuff going on in the political sphere right now, and differences or common ground is almost nowhere to be found. It feels. I feel this book kind of brings it into perspective, and Gulliver is very kind and kind and he's willing to learn. He's willing to absorb information and as it is. He's not really looking to judge. And so he takes in all their culture and he records a lot of it to share with other people, but he doesn't feel like it's his place to really instruct or influence how any of it works, which I appreciate. I can't remember why he left this one. Why did he leave this one? I think he left because he needed to leave. For some reason. Oh, how could I forget? He encounters the Stroldbrugs. People, so some certain people in their culture are born immortal. So once they reach... Actually, no, that's not true. So they're born immortal and they continue to age. They just never die. They're considered legally dead at the age of 80. I like that. He goes and meets some of them because from his perspective, how wonderful. What a gift, right? You can remember so much knowledge and you can now instruct, maybe not instruct, but advise future generations and generations and generations. You can advise them from what you know, what you've seen. But he goes and he meets, I think, just one of these people. And they are vile and selfish and they care for nothing. They live forever. They have no reason to do anything. There's no rush for nothing. There's no incentive to get anything done. And they're just lazy and a little bit self-centered. It's weird. I think they have like a black mark on their forehead or their hair, something to where you can visually differentiate them from the rest of the people. What a strange... Because like even in most depictions of immortality, like look at Yoda. I know he's not immortal, but for all intents and purposes, he's close to it. And he's taken the charge of learning so much Jedi knowledge and passing it on to generations. Look at Ego, the planet from Guardians of the Galaxy. He's using his immortality for he's using his immortality for more nefarious schemes, for gaining power, for ruling the galaxy through turning planets into blue goop, whatever he was doing. It makes more sense in the terms of a story, right? Because you want to hear about that, even if it's nefarious. It's interesting. But with this, what are they called? Stroldbergs. It feels very realistic. Like, what would I do if I was immortal? It'd be tough. Because I already have issues and struggles with completing tasks, doing what I want. And yet, if I knew that, just doing whatever, because I'm immortal, it feels very real. I really like that. This one has, I would say, the most nuance and the most little bits of important notes throughout the whole book. And there's so much that goes on, it's really hard to talk about. Also, I don't remember this book very well. I should read it again. This one's funny. This one's funny, and this is my favorite book. And I'm very sad that it's not more talked about it. So his last voyage, he goes to Hanyu Hunlumnus. I don't know how to say it, but I think that's the point. He goes here and he meets. Let me get my book out because there's a couple bits that I want to read to you. I fell into a beaten road, where I saw many tracks of human feet and some of cows, but most horses. At last I beheld several animals in a field, and one or two of the same kind sitting in trees. Their shape was very singular and deformed, which a little discomposed me, so that I lay down behind a thicket to observe them better. Some of them coming forward near the place where I lay gave me opportunity of distinctly marking their form. Their heads and breasts were covered with a thick hair, some frizzled and others lank. They had beards like goats, and a long ridge of hair down their backs, and their foreparts of their legs and feet. But the rest of their bodies were bare, so I might see their skins, which were of a brown, buff color. They had no tails, nor any hair at all on their buttocks, and they sat on the ground, as well as lying down, and often stood on their hind feet. They climbed high trees as nimbly as a squirrel, for they had strong extended claws before and behind, terminating in sharp points, and hooked. They would often spring and bound and leap with prodigious agility. The females were not so large as the males, for they had lank hair on their heads, and none on their faces. Their dugs hung between their forefeet, and often reached almost the ground as they walked. The hair of both sexes was of several colors, brown, red, black, and yellow. Upon the whole, I never beheld in my travels so disagreeable an animal, nor one against which I naturally conceived so strong an antipathy. Do you know what he's talking about? I didn't know what he was talking about at first. I didn't know until I continued reading. They're humans. They're humans as if we evolved slightly different. He's described essentially a caveman, but with claws, right? Where we have nails. And the main, what should I say, the creature, I suppose, of these worlds, the masters of the world, as humans are the masters of ours, are horses, or Honyuhumans, whatever. It's strange. It gives a very different picture. And in this book, this is, like I said, by far my favorite. He talks about a society of horses who have just completely different views, goals, wants, and desires. As a human, it's very common to have, like humans are prideful, greedy, lustly, envious, gluttonous, wrathful, and lazy. It's 7 deadly sins, right? But the horses, completely different. Their pride is ensuring, is that right? Am I saying that right? Yeah, ensuring that their peoples are safe and well taken care of. That their livestock, in this case the humans and the cows and whatnot, are content, and that they continue to produce what they need, and they continue to live fulfilling lives. They're not greedy. They live in simple houses. There's no money. There's no like super advanced technology that forces them to compete. Lust is not in the question. They have arranged marriages, which are simply to increase the genetic diversity of their population. Their marriages are specifically tailored. So if there's like a horse with a very gentle temperament and a horse with a very wild one, they'll specifically put them together. So their offspring will be ideally subdued and easygoing. That's weird. Since they're not greedy, there's not really much to envy with each other. They only eat what they need. They're not gluttonous, wrathful. They don't even know what wars are. Most of these words, in fact, aren't even in their language. Gulliver goes into details on how he had to explain in extreme roundabout ways on certain things of like greed and war and weapons and stuff because they just don't have these things. And laziness isn't really a thing for them either. This one is like this is so. It's just my favorite by far. It's also very very cynical of the human condition because it takes what humans are and reduces us down to our least attractive traits, to our most vile tendencies. And the humans, they're actually called yahoos. So the yahoos in, uh, once again, what is it called? Human are reflections of that. But since they haven't developed any higher intelligence, they're still animals. And so this world is almost saved or protected in a way. I also thought about, I haven't looked this up, but have you ever called someone a Yahoo? I call my friends Yahoos. They call me Yahoos. I never really thought about it until I read this book. I wonder if Jonathan Swift coined that term because now it means a lot more. Like I understand what it means now. It's a very disparaging insult. I didn't realize that. It's kind of like in the political climate today, a lot of people are called sheep. That implies that they're just following the herd, whatnot, right? And it didn't mean all that much to me. It's just a haha sheep kind of thing until I read Animal Farm by George Orwell. It really puts into context what that really means, what that insult really means. And colloquially, I would say most people, like the Yahoos, it's not really meant to be that disparaging, that rude. But if you've read that book and you know what the intent was behind it, it really puts a lot more power behind those words. It's so interesting. Granted, the sheep one's probably not as good as an example because, um, a lot of religions use it as the Abrahamic religion kind of refers to their followers as sheep, the lambs of God and whatnot. So there's more context to that and probably wasn't initially. Anyways, it's still fascinating. I love finding little stuff like that. The saddest part, though, about this was the horses, they get together and they have kind of like big meetings about how to run the stuff, how to keep everything running smoothly. Trade male horses and female horses to make, like I said, the tempered young and keep the herd genetically diverse and all that good stuff. And they had a discussion about Gulliver, the learned Yahoo, and they came to the conclusion, especially from all the stories that Gulliver has been telling his master, they concluded that he was a danger and he was just not welcome. Not because they didn't like him or anything, but because they understood. They could see, like the Yahoos there were very physically expressed the evil traits of a human, right? And they looked at Gulliver and they knew that those traits were inside of him. Even though Gulliver is a good man, they knew that they're in him and they recognized that. And they said logically, even though he's a good man now, logically, we can't trust that. They're big on logic. Gulliver talks about logic a lot when he's with them. And so they said, you have to go, or we're going to return you to the herds of Yahoos. And of course, Gulliver's just beside himself. He's just distressed because this is his favorite place to be. He wants to live here forever. He loves these Honeymians, whatever. And he's crying and weeping, and he expresses his regret, but he also expresses that he understands. He knows, and he says he'll leave. So he builds himself a boat, and he sails off. It's very sad. That's the end. That's the end of his adventures. You can read the book as a lighthearted, maybe not the last one, but as a lighthearted, fun adventure, and I think that's what that's what the most recent film expressed, right? Because it was with Jack Black. I like Jack Black, but he's definitely not a really serious actor. He's good though. He's more of a comedic actor. But the context and the subplots run so much deeper than just, oh my gosh, little people. Give it a read. Definitely give it a read. This is I can see why it survived for 300 years. It's really